The new financial year has seen superannuation legislation formulated by the previous government come into effect. Peter Burgess from the SMSF Association joins me to discuss some of these changes. Welcome, Peter.
Hello, Darren. It's a pleasure to be here.
Look, let's start with a really quick summary of the legislative amendments that took effect on the 1st of July this year.
Yeah, look, there was a number of changes come into play from the 1st of July this year. These were all included in that Treasury Law Amendment Bill, which was passed into law in February this year. So included in that bill was the removal of the $450 threshold for SG contributions. So that's now been removed. We did see an increase in the amount that can be withdrawn from the First Home Super Saver scheme. So that's been increased from $35,000 to $50,000 from the 1st of July this year. We also saw the work test reforms, so the removal of the work test for those aged between 67 and 75. So individuals in that age bracket can now make voluntary contributions without having to meet the work test, and also the non-concessional contribution bring forward rules have been extended for that age group as well. So individuals up to the age of 75 can now make or are now eligible to make use of those rules, assuming they have the subject to the transfer total super balance and also the contribution caps, of course. And the other one was the reduction in the eligibility age for downsizer contributions. So from 1 July this year, the eligibility age for downsizer contributions has been reduced from 65 to 60. Now, just on that, there's been a bit of confusion about this one. We've had quite a few calls from SMSF members just clarifying whether the eligibility age is actually 55 and not 60. It was announced by both political parties during the election campaign that they would reduce the eligibility age down to 55, but that hasn't happened yet. That's not law. So as the law currently stands, the eligibility age is 60 from the 1st of July this year. So they're the key changes that have come in from 1 July this year. A lot of these changes are designed to provide greater flexibility for older Australians in particular to make contributions to super.
If you were to look at all of those changes, which one would you select that you think will be the most significant?
Yeah, look, the standout one for me is the removal of the work test. So for those individuals between 67 and 75, now being able to make voluntary contributions without having to meet that work test, I think is a really big one. So we've got this cohort now that in previous years may not have been able to contribute because they didn't meet that work test. The fact that that's now been removed, I think that's the big one for me. I think the one thing to note about the work test, we talk about it being removed, and yes, it has been removed from the superannuation legislation, but technically it's been moved to the Tax Act. So it's been taken out of the superannuation legislation. It's no longer a condition that needs to be satisfied in order for trustees to accept a contribution, but it is now in the Tax Act, and it's a condition that needs to be satisfied in order for someone to be able to claim a tax deduction for that contribution in that age bracket. So the big one for me is that work test removal from the superannuation legislation. I think that opens up many opportunities for clients in that age group.
Just following on from that point and the opportunities that have been created, what are some of the strategy considerations that trustees and advisors will have to look at now in light of those changes?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned, so for those in that age group between that 67 to 75 who perhaps previously have not been able to make voluntary contributions because they haven't met that work test. So from 1 July this year, they now can potentially be able to make those contributions, subject, of course, to their total super balance and satisfying the contribution caps. But being able to make those contributions they haven't been able to do before. So it's looking at those clients to see whether they can make those contributions, and things like recontribution strategies that are now perhaps available to that cohort that haven't been available in the past, and that can be a useful way of evening up balances between spouses. Clients who perhaps have already started a pension, should they stop that pension, add in some more contributions now because they can, and then restart a new pension, or should they keep that existing pension untouched and make contributions and start a second pension? There's all sorts of pluses and minuses as to which way you should go. So that's it really is a strategy consideration there. So there's really lots there for advisors to be talking to their clients about in that age group, given that we don't have this work test now and the ability to be able to make those contributions. And so thinking about things like recontribution strategies and the like. The other one for me is the downsizer changes. So reducing that eligibility age from 65 to 60 obviously means there'll be more people that may be eligible to make a downsizer contribution. So I guess some of the things that advisors need to be thinking about, well, should the clients in that situation be actually making a downsizer contribution now, or should they leave it for later in life? Because you can only do this once. Given that there's a reduction in the eligibility age, there's a possibility they may sell another property at some point in the future and be entitled to make a downsizer contribution later in life. So, their discussions, their conversations that advisors will need to have with clients as to, well, okay, you have sold your house, you are eligible now to make this downsizer contribution. Should we do it now, or should we not do it now? Because once that contribution is made, it does count towards the client's total super balance. And that can have an impact on their ability to access, the catch-up concessional contributions, and possibly also be able to make non-concessional contributions at some point in the future. So there's lots there to think about from a strategy perspective.
So, Peter, we've been talking about some of the measures that have been passed into law that were announced by the previous government. But there are some measures that they announced that are still yet to be legislated. What are some of the major ones that people have to be conscious of?
Yeah, well, I guess there's two that are very relevant to self-managed super funds and very close to the SMSF Association's heart. They're measures that were included in our budget submission last year and were included in the budget last year. And that's, of course, that the 2-year amnesty period for legacy pensions, which was announced in the budget last year. Now, that has not been legislated. We haven't seen any consultation papers or draft legislation prior to the election being called. So we're unclear at this point as to whether the new Labor government will proceed with that particular measure, but certainly we would like to see that occur. We think that's an important one, just to tidy up those legacy pensions and give individuals the opportunity to get out of those pensions. We think that's a really good measure. And the other one, of course, is those residency rule changes, the removal of the active member test and the changes to the temporary absence and control test. They were also announced in the budget in 2021, but they have not been legislated. So they're two measures that were left over from the previous government. We would really like to see the new Labor government adopt those measures and introduce those measures. So they're the two big ones for the self-managed super fund sector. I guess the other one here is the non-arm's length income, the non-arm's length expenditure issue. We did have that announcement prior to the election from the coalition government at the time that they would amend the rules to ensure that non-arm's length expenditure rules work as intended. We're hoping that the Labor comes out with a similar announcement and does make those amendments, because we do need to make some amendments to those rules to ensure they work as intended. So that's another one that's essentially left over from the previous government that we'd like to see taken up by the new Labor government.
Well, Peter, while I've got you on the line, it would be remiss of me not to mention that the SMSF Association Technical Summit is coming up in a few weeks' time, actually. What are some of the highlights delegates can look forward to if they're going to be attending?
Well, for SMSF specialists, there's a lot to like about the SMSF Technical Summit program. We've got 3 keynote addresses. So this will be over 2 days. There'll be 3 keynote addresses covering things like legislation updates. So I'll be doing a legislation update at the start of the summit. We'll also have keynote addresses from Craig Day and Bryce Vigo covering things like funding and contribution strategies and the latest estate planning developments. In addition to that, we've got 6 2-hour workshops, or deep dives we're calling them, 8 concurrent technical sessions, covering a range of topics, including pension strategies, death benefit strategies. Also, a really interesting workshop that will be delivered by Scott Hay-Bartlam, talking about the boundaries of SMSF advice. So when is something legal advice, and when is it not legal advice? When is it tax advice? When it's not tax advice? So, where do all the boundaries lie? So I think that'll be a really interesting topic. We've got a session on digital assets, talking about the basics of blockchain and also the taxation treatment of cryptocurrency. mental health. We've got a topic on mental health. So Philippa Hunt will be talking about a recent survey that was conducted, really confronting and alarming results from that survey. So Philippa will be talking about some of the ways to identify stress and what advisors can do, strategies they can put in place to get some positive outcomes. So that's another session that I'm really looking forward to. And of course, we've also got our industry breakfast at the start of day 2. So that will be looking at the quality of advice review, and we'll have the review lead, Michelle Levy, leading that panel discussion. So that's one to look out for. And in addition to that, we've got some networking events. This is going to have a real national conference type vibe to it, I think. So I can assure you that the delegates that attend, they're in for a real treat. So lots on offer for technical members, lots of technical content. I firmly believe it's one of the strongest technical programs that we've put together. So really excited about it and really looking forward to it.
Sounds really good, Peter, and thank you for sharing that information with us.
Sure, not a problem, Darren.
Peter will be discussing these issues in more detail during his presentation at the SMSF Association Technical Summit for 2022, taking place on the 27th and the 28th of July at the RACV Royal Pines Resort on the Gold Coast. To register for the event, please reference the details you can see on screen now. Look, thanks again for your time, Peter, this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you on the Gold Coast at the end of July.
Pleasure, Darren.